Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go.
I'm not your toy. I say these words quietly at first, still tasting the edges of them as they leave my mouth. They sound like they belong to someone else. Her eyes flicker with an emotion I can't quite name. Maybe annoyance, maybe pity, because we both know I've never spoken to her this way before. I breathe in, force my shoulders back, and watch as she tilts her head, waiting for me to continue. But I don't. I stay silent, feeling the slow drum of my pulse that's too loud in my ears. My mind says, "You're losing it. You're saying things you never imagined you'd say." And yet I don't stop. I turn around, and for a second, it's like I'm watching myself from across the room. There's the me who's about to walk out the door, my footsteps sounding too heavy on the hardwood floor. And there's the me who can't let go, who keeps replaying the same old story in his head. I used to be a reasonable man, measured, not given to outbursts or dramatic proclamations. Now I'm so far from who I was that I sometimes don't recognize my own voice. You might wonder why I'm like this, why a man nearing 50 stands in the middle of a living room in Chicago, telling his wife he's not her toy. But that's how these things begin, don't they? Tiny cracks creeping along the walls of a marriage, unnoticed until the day they split wide open. I never thought it would happen to me. Honestly, I never did. I step outside, and the air is biting cold. Evening has settled in, the Chicago skyline glimmering beyond the buildings, streetlights reflecting on damp sidewalks. My breath forms a faint fog that drifts away, leaving me with the sharp reality of this moment. She doesn't come after me. Not yet. I don't even hear the door close behind me, and it strikes me how that silence can hurt more than any argument. There's no shout, no demand for me to turn around. It's like she let me slip away without a sound. I walk, arms clutched around my chest, wind stinging my face, but it's not enough to numb me to what I feel inside. The first time I realized everything had changed was at that cafe, just last week. I was trying to clear my head, or maybe I was running from it. I'm not sure anymore. She'd said she needed space. I didn't argue, only retreated into my routines, like a wounded animal licking its wounds in private. I told myself, she'll be back. She's upset, but she'll be back. Then I saw her. I caught sight of her in that snug little coffee shop near the financial district, a place I used to visit sometimes after work. I remember the strong whiff of espresso, the hum of conversation, the scrape of chairs on the tiled floor. I'd gone there to distract myself from the ache of an empty house, to nurse a black coffee that I barely tasted. Suddenly, I heard her laugh. A sound once so enchanting, it lit up my evenings. Now it made my chest tighten, a raw tension crawling up my spine. She was talking to a friend, someone I barely knew, her words fluttering in the air. "You've left your husband already?" asked the friend. Such a simple question, delivered in a casual half-whisper. And then my wife, Anna, tilted her head back and let out that laugh, the one that used to fill me with contentment. The friend didn't notice me, but Anna glanced around, and our eyes met. For a moment, I thought I saw guilt in her gaze, or fear. But it might have just been a flicker of the overhead light, shifting across her pupils. My heart pounded, adrenaline surging, and everything else. The chatter of the barista, the hiss of the espresso machine, faded into a dull hum. I realized then it wasn't just space. She was truly gone from me, drifting away to a place I couldn't follow. I tried to speak, but no words came. My throat felt cramped. I don't recall how I left. One minute I was standing there, my mind screaming, "This can't be happening." The next, I was outside, stumbling onto the sidewalk, the coffee forgotten on a table behind me. I felt like the world had shifted on its axis, pushing me into a reality I never gave permission to exist. Later that evening, her side of the closet was half empty. That was my second sign. I told myself, maybe she's staying with a friend. But deep down, I knew better. I laid awake for hours, my eyes on the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of traffic outside. My mind turned over everything that had gone wrong. The fleeting arguments, the nights we barely spoke, the way she sometimes looked at me as though I were a stranger. At 2 a.m., I realized I didn't even know where she was sleeping. I wanted to call, to demand an explanation. But I've never been one for confrontation. So I did the only thing my pride would allow. I waited. I believed she'd come home eventually, or at least call me, or do something more than vanish with no explanation, but a single question from a friend. "You've left your husband already?" Echoing in my ears. But she didn't. The next day, or maybe a couple of days later, I've lost track, I found myself at his doorstep. Mike Davis. I'd known about him in vague terms. A freelance writer, a traveling blogger, someone with a carefree approach to life that I'd always dismissed as irresponsible. A man she spoke of occasionally, in that tone that suggested both fascination and exasperation. "He's so unpredictable," she'd say, and I'd laugh it off. He sounds like a hothead, never once considering he might be the man she'd run to. I remember standing outside his place, a modest apartment building on a crowded street, and I felt like I was floating above myself again. I had no idea what I planned to say, only that I needed to see him. Needed to stand before him and understand why my life was spiraling out of control. My fists clenched at my sides, 1,000 unformed words seething inside me. He opened the door in jeans and a half-unbuttoned shirt, hair a bit disheveled, that slight Texan lilt coloring his tone when he said, "You all right, man?" That's what he asked me. Not, "Who are you?" or "What do you want?" but "You all right, man?" As if I'd just knocked on his door to borrow sugar. I stared at him, my jaw tight, and said in a voice I barely recognized, "You took emptiness." Don't ask me where that phrase came from. It just rose from a deep well of anguish in my gut. I meant that whatever was left of her, I felt it was drained and hollow. He had a piece of her, sure, but I was the one left with the echo. It must have sounded like a threat, but it wasn't. It was just the truth as I saw it in that moment. He gave me a strange look. I think he said something back. An apology, or maybe a protest, but I didn't listen. The details blur together. I only remember the stench of stale coffee in the hallway, the chipped paint on the walls, and the realization that I didn't even feel hatred for him. I just felt numb, because he wasn't the only reason my marriage had collapsed. He was just the final push off the cliff. The rest of it was me and her, drifting, ignoring cracks, pretending everything was fine. I turned and left without letting him finish whatever he was trying to say. My feet pounded the concrete stairs on the way out, each step echoing the drumbeat of my unsettled heart. It was like stepping through a fog of confusion and rage, but none of it quite crystallized into the hot anger you'd expect. I was simply exhausted by the emptiness that had become my life. I headed back to what was once our home. By the time I reached the front door, it was night again. Rain started to drizzle, city lights reflecting in shimmering puddles. I wanted a confrontation, wanted her to appear in front of me so I could ask, why him? Why do this? Why throw everything away? But the silent house offered no answers. It was only after I slipped my key into the lock that I noticed her standing a few feet away, arms folded across her chest, hair damp from the drizzle, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. She looked uncertain, worried, maybe. She opened her mouth, but I spoke first. "I don't want to hear it," I murmured. Cold, lifeless words. I was done with the swirling chaos in my head. I told myself if I ever saw her again, I would unleash the tsunami of questions, but in that instant, I just felt drained. "I'm tired," I said, stepping past her. My voice had no warmth left in it. She tried to touch my arm, but I pulled away. She whispered something, but I couldn't make out the words. A part of me thinks she asked for forgiveness. Another part thinks she told me it wasn't what I imagined. But I kept walking, and she stood there, letting her hand drop to her side. I stepped into the house. Dimly lit, silent, suffocating. Shadows clung to the walls as if they'd been waiting for me. The lamp in the corner flickered, or maybe my vision did. I made my way to the bedroom, sank onto the bed, and in the darkness, I felt the slow, suffocating press of 1,000 unspoken words. So this is how it ends, I thought. Not with a bang, not with a grand fight, but with a quiet slip into a black void, neither fully in nor out of the marriage. I slept only in fragments of dreams. Scenes flickered. Anna's laugh in the cafe, the half-packed closet, Mike's face at the door, that hush before she spoke at the threshold. My breathing turned ragged. My chest ached. At some point, exhaustion overwhelmed me, and I drifted into a shallow sleep, half convinced I wouldn't wake up to the same world. Morning arrived, the bedroom filled with dull gray light. My phone rang. A friend from work, worried about me. "Hey Jim, are you okay? You haven't shown up for 2 days." I realized I hadn't even called in sick. In my entire career as a financial consultant, I'd never done something so irresponsible. Usually, I was the stable one, predictable, reliable to a fault. But I said nothing about the truth, just told him I was dealing with some issues. That's how these personal implosions go. You can't quite put them into words for anyone who isn't living them. I forced myself to shower, to dress. The routine felt hollow but necessary. I needed a semblance of normalcy, some anchor to keep from drifting into an abyss. I avoided the living room, not sure if she was still there. I left the house without checking. Let her stay, let her leave. It was like I couldn't muster the strength to care. At the office, nobody said much, but I saw the questions in their eyes. Usually, I come in with a polite smile, a nod of greeting. That day, I felt like a ghost wandering among the living. My tie felt too tight, my shirt collar strangling me. I tried to do the work, numbers, charts, projections, but my mind replayed fragments of that cafe, that question from her friend, that look in Anna's eyes. "You've left your husband already," over and over. By noon, I couldn't take it. I told my boss I needed time, gave a half-hearted excuse about a family emergency, and walked out. Outside, the sun had broken through the clouds, mocking me with its bright light. I pulled at my tie until it loosened, then started drifting down the city streets, not caring where I ended up. It was in that wandering that I first found the nerve to think. She was in his arms. She gave herself to him. The night we parted, or maybe a week before, or a month, I didn't know. But I had that dreadful certainty that it was more than an emotional affair. I pictured the two of them tangled together in a bed that wasn't mine, her hair spread across the pillow, his hand on her waist. The rawness of that image made me stop in my tracks, my stomach lurching. I leaned against a cold brick wall, the city crowd flowing around me, not sparing a glance. This is how a man breaks. Not with a grand theatrical meltdown, but with quiet horror at an image he can't purge from his head. I can't do this, I thought. I can't just stand here. I forced myself to keep walking, trying to bury that vision in some far corner of my mind. But the mind is a stubborn beast. It gnaws at you when you're vulnerable. I felt it scraping at me, painting more vivid details of their intimacy. The curve of her body, the scent of her shampoo, the softness of her skin. Memories that used to be mine, now tainted by the knowledge that another man had those same moments with her. It was the kind of cold, internal destruction that doesn't show on your face, but devours you from the inside. Hours later, I found myself back home. She wasn't there this time. I checked the closet. More of her things were missing. Shoes, dresses, small personal items. So she's taken even more, I noted numbly. The bed was still unmade from the morning. A half-empty coffee mug on the counter. Evidence of someone who dropped by for a moment, then left in a hurry. I sank into the couch, letting my head fall back. I remembered the day we got married, though that memory was like a distant flicker. She was radiant in her white dress. People congratulated us, and I felt like the luckiest man alive. Everything about our life felt wide open, then full of promise. And now, I was the man she left behind without so much as a real explanation. Or maybe the explanation was everywhere. In the silences between us, the long nights without conversation, the sense that we'd become strangers living under one roof. That evening, I decided I wouldn't just drown in passivity. I needed answers. I needed to see Anna again, needed to confront her properly. No more half-words or shutting her out. If I was going to end up in hell, I at least wanted to understand how I'd gotten there. So I texted her. "We need to talk. Face to face." She didn't reply right away. I paced the living room, eyes darting to the phone. When the screen finally lit, it was just a single word. "Okay." We met 2 days later at a small restaurant we both used to like. A part of me thought it was insane to pick a place where we had happy memories, but maybe that was the point. We used to come here on weekends, I told myself, before everything went sour. The restaurant was busy enough that we had a semblance of privacy without feeling isolated. She arrived wearing a simple coat, hair pulled back, face paler than usual. It struck me how I barely recognized her mood. Once, I could read her expressions as easily as breathing. Now, I was lost. We sat across from each other in a booth, neither of us reaching for the menu. The tension felt like a physical barrier between us. She spoke first, voice trembling. I didn't want it to happen like this. The words sounded robotic, rehearsed. I inhaled, calming my heartbeat that threatened to spike. I tried to respond with calmness. "Tell me why." She pressed her lips together. "We lost each other. You know that." I watched her fingers trace the edge of a napkin. "That's not an answer." Her gaze drifted to the window, then back to me. She took a breath. Mike. He was just there when I felt alone. It was never meant to become. I caught the slump of her shoulders. She was giving me these carefully measured phrases, half confessions that felt worthless. It lit a spark of anger behind my ribs. The old me would have tried to soothe her. The man I am now just let the cold fury seep into my words. "And so you slept with him." Her cheeks reddened. She squeezed her eyes shut for a second. "I didn't plan on hurting you," she whispered, voice thick. But it wasn't just about sex, it was about... I cut her off, my hand curling into a fist beneath the table. "I don't want the details." My voice shook with that quiet rage. "I just need to know why you never tried to fix what was broken here." She looked at me, tears threatening to spill over. "Because I was drowning," she said in a broken whisper. "You were always at work or so distant. I tried to talk. You didn't listen. Maybe you thought I was still your perfect wife, but I was screaming inside. And then there was Mike, listening, making me feel alive. I know it's messed up. I know it's wrong. But I'm telling you the truth." Her confession landed like shards of glass. Part of me wanted to blame her for everything. Another part recognized my own failures, my negligence, my complacency. We'd built a marriage on unspoken assumptions, never addressing what might be rotting at the core. I wondered if we could have saved it with a single honest conversation a year ago. But that thought died as quickly as it came. I glanced at her face, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I still loved her. Then the memory of her with him came roaring back, and I tasted bile on my tongue. "Why tell me any of this now?" Her eyes flicked down. "Because I owe you at least that. If we can't fix it, we can end it properly." I forced down the lump in my throat. "You want a divorce, then?" She looked pained, like she hated hearing the word. But she didn't say no. Instead, she wiped at her cheek. "I want peace," she said finally. The silence between us was heavy and final. We didn't order anything. After a minute, she muttered something about how she had to leave. I just nodded, feeling the last shred of my old self crumble away. Then she stood and walked out, leaving me behind in that booth. I sat there for a long time, the waitress eventually hovering near. She asked if I wanted anything. I managed to order water, but I barely touched it. My mind was racing with too many thoughts, none of them leading to a hopeful conclusion. The life we'd built was over. The only question was what came next for me. I found my voice again an hour later, or maybe more. I told myself, all right, Jim, time to finish this. Stop clinging to illusions. That resolve took root in me. I left the restaurant, jumped into a taxi, and told the driver to take me home. My mind was filled with images. Anna's watery eyes, Mike's confused stare, the empty house that awaited me. The next few days blurred into an ugly mixture of paperwork, half-formed attempts to gather the remnants of our life, and numb acceptance. We began the steps for a formal separation. She found a place to stay, maybe with him, maybe not. I stopped asking. Meanwhile, I kept my head down at work, going through motions. People gave me sympathetic looks, but no one pried. I suspect the tension on my face warned them to keep their distance. One afternoon, she came by unannounced. I opened the door and found her standing there with a small box. It had old photo albums, notes, little sentimental scraps from our early years together. She said, "I thought you might want these. I don't want them anymore." The finality in her tone stung like a whip. I let her in. The house seemed smaller with her presence. She set the box on the table. We stood there, awkward, the unspoken words between us so thick it was hard to breathe. There was a quiet sadness in her eyes that I matched with my own emptiness. I asked her, "So this is it?" She nodded, not meeting my gaze. "I can't undo what I did, and I can't lie to you anymore." We talked in broken fragments. She said she was sorry for hurting me. I said I was sorry for not seeing how unhappy she was. But the words felt like a postscript, an afterthought to a story that had already ended. When she left that day, I felt no anger, no immediate heartbreak, just a deep hollowness, as though the best parts of me had evaporated. That night, I lay on the couch, flipping through the old photo album she'd brought. Pictures of us grinning at the camera during our honeymoon, a few birthdays, weekend getaways. I thought, who is that man? Because I certainly didn't feel like him anymore. Time passed, days, maybe a couple of weeks. We continued the formalities, dividing accounts, splitting possessions. She let me have the house, though I suspected it was out of guilt more than generosity. I decided I didn't want to keep it anyway. Every corner echoed with memories, so I put it up for sale, ignoring the pang in my gut that felt like betrayal of my own past. One evening, as I was packing boxes, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "It's Mike. Can we talk?" My first instinct was to ignore it. He had no place in my life. But after a few minutes of pacing, I found myself writing back. "Talk about what?" He responded quickly. "I need to say something. Please." I hesitated, then gave him a time and a cafe in a neutral part of town. Maybe I wanted some kind of closure, or maybe I was just curious. We arranged to meet the next day around dusk. I arrived first and sat at a corner table. My stomach was knotted, my heart pounding. "Why am I here?" I questioned, but something in me wanted to face him one last time, to look him in the eye without illusions. He walked in, wearing a leather jacket, an apologetic expression pinned to his face. As he approached the table, I noticed he looked older than I remembered. Stress lines on his forehead, a faint slump in his posture. He wasn't as cocksure as he'd been before. He slipped into the seat across from me, and for a moment, neither of us said a word. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Look, I'm not here to make excuses or anything like that. I just wanted to." He faltered. "I just wanted you to know I never planned on messing up your marriage." I stared at him, waiting. Inside, I could feel a strange sense of calm. "Right." He swallowed. "Anna. She was unhappy. She was hurting. And we." He stopped, gaze drifting to the side, as if searching for the right words. "It was never about taking something from you. I swear, man, I never wanted this to blow up your life." I didn't respond. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness matching the taste in my mouth. He pressed on. And for what it's worth, I'm not even sure we'll stay together. She's got a lot going on. He trailed off, shrugging helplessly. A flicker of pity warmed its way through my anger. I set my mug down. My voice was low, calm. You want my blessing or something? He shook his head, face flushing. No, God, no. I'm sorry. That's all. I considered him. He looked sincere, in a broken sort of way. A corner of me wanted to punch him. But what good would that do? The marriage was already dead, and my fight was with that ghost. I got nothing else to say, Mike. I finally answered. What's done is done. He nodded, eyes flicking around uncertain. I just wanted you to know. We sat in uncomfortable silence for a minute. Then he stood, mumbled a take care, and left. I watched him go, not sure if I felt any better. I supposed part of me appreciated that he tried to speak to me man to man, but it didn't change what happened. It didn't quell the emptiness gnawing at me. A few more days slid by as I packed up the last of my things. Anna came once more, collecting the rest of her clothes. We barely spoke, just exchanged civilities. Then she was gone again. The house echoed with loneliness. I found myself revisiting that question. Who am I now without her? For so many years, I defined myself as her husband, the dependable provider. Now that identity had been ripped away. I felt lost, unmoored. Some nights, I'd find myself awake at 3 a.m., wandering from room to room, flipping lights on and off, as though searching for the ghost of our former life. The legal steps took shape. Divorce papers, asset division. We gave it a name. Irreconcilable differences. Neat, tidy words for a heartbreak that had shattered my sense of self. Meanwhile, I forced myself to keep functioning. Go to work, pay bills, keep breathing. The sale of the house went through surprisingly fast. The real estate market was eager for such a property in a decent neighborhood. On a Saturday afternoon, with half my belongings in storage and the rest in a U-Haul, I closed the front door for the last time. I stared at it, remembering the day Anna and I first moved in, the hopes we pinned on these walls. The younger me might have cried, but I felt no tears, just a dull acceptance. It's over. I drove cross town to a small temporary apartment that I'd rented. The place was bare, a single bed, a chair, a stack of boxes. That night, lying in the unfamiliar darkness, I reflected on everything. A sudden wave of anger coursed through me. Not at Anna or Mike specifically, but at life. At the notion that so much can unravel so quickly, leaving you with scraps. That's when the revenge crossed my mind. Before this, I'd told myself revenge was pointless, or something that belonged in dramatic novels. But there in the gloom, I felt it stirring. A raw, savage desire to even the score, to give them a taste of the emptiness they forced upon me. My rational mind argued it would accomplish nothing, but the wounded part of me demanded retribution. I stewed on it. I pictured 100 petty ways to lash out. Spread rumors about Mike, humiliate Anna, sabotage their reputations. But none of it satisfied me in my imagination. It all felt small compared to the enormity of my pain, and I realized something crucial. I didn't want to let them keep controlling my emotions. If I let bitterness consume me, I'd remain their prisoner. Yet, some part of me needed closure, needed a final statement that said, "You can't break me." That I might be battered, but not destroyed. The next few weeks, I busied myself with setting up my new place, diving into work, forcing a routine that left little time to brood. My coworkers noticed a shift in me. I was quieter, more driven, pushing through tasks with an almost ruthless efficiency. At night, though, I'd stare at the ceiling, or sometimes at the flickering reflection of traffic lights on my window, thinking about her, wondering if she was with him now, or if she ever felt a pang of guilt or regret. One Friday night, on a whim, I stopped by that cafe again, the same place I'd overheard her damning conversation. This time, I wasn't there by accident. I wanted to face the memory. The smell of espresso, the soft music, the swirl of chatty patrons. I sat at a table near the back, my coffee in hand, letting my mind slip into that day when I first realized she was gone. I expected to feel pain or maybe a wave of rage. Instead, all I felt was emptiness, a numb sense that the man who discovered her betrayal was not quite the man I was now. That's when I accepted that any revenge I planned was pointless. She had made her choice, and nothing I did would undo it. The only power I had left was over my own future. Still, the story needed an ending. And sometimes, endings are as simple as a phone call. That night, I went back to my apartment, poured myself a stiff drink, and looked up at the city lights through my window. I found her number in my phone. God, how many times had I hovered over it these past months? This time, I pressed call. My heart hammered as it rang. She picked up on the third ring. Her voice was soft. Hello. I shut my eyes, swallowing the lump in my throat. Hey, I said, my voice sounding more grounded than I felt. I need to say something. A pause. I'm listening. I let out a slow breath. I forgive you. The words surprised even me. She exhaled sharply on the other end. But I didn't stop. I don't want to keep hating you or him. I don't want to drown in it. I'm done. Silence. Then a shaky inhale. Jim, I cut her off. Not harshly, but firmly. I don't want an apology. I'm not calling to get one. I'm calling to let go. I opened my eyes, took in the quiet dark of my living room. I'm going to move on. I'm going to figure out who I am without you. I just wanted you to know that. She was crying softly. I could tell, but I felt only calm. Okay, she whispered. I wish you could see I never meant to. I spoke more gently than I expected. It doesn't matter now. We lingered in silence. Then she said a final, take care, and hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand. The call ended, the line silent. I felt a strange peace, combined with a deep exhaustion. It's not that my wounds magically healed at that moment. They were still raw. They'd still ache for months, maybe years. But I'd taken the first step in freeing myself from the bitterness. That night, I slept a full 8 hours for the first time since she left. The next morning, I woke up at dawn and decided it was time for a change of scenery. I dug through my closet, unearthed a duffel bag, and began packing. A few shirts, some jeans, essential toiletries. I had vacation time saved up at work. Why not use it? It felt like a bold decision for someone as structured as me, but I realized I needed to break out of the cage I'd built for myself. The final satisfaction I found wasn't in punishing her or him. It was in choosing to reclaim my life, step by step. As I folded clothes into the bag, a faint sense of excitement stirred inside me. A new beginning on my terms. I might not know exactly who I am now, but I can learn. I can become something more than just the man who was betrayed. I've kept my word. I've let go of the notion that I need revenge to find closure. I still see her in my memories, still feel the pang. But I've stopped replaying the betrayal like a loop. I'm forging a new path, one that doesn't revolve around her or my old illusions. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, I still hear an echo of her laughter from that day in the cafe, or the gentle weight of her hand on my arm from years back. I won't pretend that doesn't hurt, but I can breathe now. I can think about tomorrow without feeling trapped in yesterday. You might wonder if I regret not making a bigger scene, some dramatic confrontation. In truth, that was never who I was, and now, it's not who I want to be. Let them both face their own consequences, find their own way. I don't belong in that story anymore. I belong to me. So this is my final confession, the last piece of a broken man's puzzle. I didn't set out to become this version of myself, but life has a way of shattering us, so we can rebuild differently. I'm a work in progress. No illusions about that. Some days, I still feel the old anger and grief creeping in. On those days, I remind myself that I'm not the same Jim Randall who lived in that house and believed he had it all figured out. That man is gone. In his place stands someone else, forged by heartbreak and the ashes of a marriage that once was everything to him. It's time to be someone new. And if one day she realizes what she lost, or he realizes the turmoil he caused, well, that's their burden to carry. Mine is simply to wake up each day and keep putting one foot in front of the other, to find out what lies beyond the edges of my old life. I said at the beginning, I Tevin Agreshka am not your toy. Looking back, I see I wasn't just talking to her. I was talking to the universe, to fate, to whatever thread of existence pulled the rug from under me. I refuse to be a plaything of tragedy. I won't let betrayal define me. So here I stand, a man who's tasted heartbreak and emptiness, who watched his wife slip away into another man's arms. I survived the shock, the numbness, the weight of silence that threatened to bury me. And in the end, I chose to let go of vengeance, because the best revenge against a broken past is to refuse to stay broken. That's the truth I'll hold on to. It might not wipe away the scars, but it sets me free to keep living. And I will keep living. Even if I don't know exactly who I am anymore, that question doesn't terrify me like it used to. Because sometimes not knowing is better than clinging to a lie. You can call it what you want. Resilience, foolish optimism, or just a man's last stand. But for me, it's the only way forward. And that, I think, is enough.